Imagine this. Your parents leave you to struggle through college alone. No financial help. Years later, they show up, asking for $200,000 for your sister's dream wedding. What would you do? Imagine this. Your parents leave you to struggle through college alone. No financial help. Years later, they show up, asking for $200,000 for your sister's dream wedding. What would you do? I was shocked when my parents approached me with this request. Growing up, I always knew my sister was the favorite, but I never imagined it would come to this. When I was preparing for college, I begged them for some financial support, but they shut me down, saying, "You're an adult now. Figure it out yourself." So I did. I worked multiple jobs, took out loans, and barely had time to sleep. I missed out on so many experiences because every dollar mattered. Now, years later, I'm finally in a stable financial position. And suddenly my parents are acting like we're one big happy family again. But only because they want my money. They didn't ask. They expected it. "It's your duty as a brother," they told me. Family helps family. But where was that attitude when I needed them? I told them no. And now the entire family is against me. Am I being selfish? Or is this just another example of favoritism taken too far? Their reaction was immediate and brutal. My parents called me ungrateful, saying I owed them for raising me. My sister cried, accusing me of ruining her dream wedding. Relatives started blowing up my phone, some guilt-tripping me, others outright insulting me. "You're successful now. $200,000 is nothing for you," one aunt texted. Another said, "Your sister deserves this. She's the golden child after all." That last comment hit hard because it was true. Growing up, she got everything: new clothes, expensive hobbies, vacations. Me? Hand-me-downs and a part-time job by 16. When I struggled through college, nobody cared. But now, when they need money, I'm suddenly the bad guy for saying no? I tried to explain that I worked for every penny, that I had my own future to think about. They didn't listen. Instead, my parents gave me an ultimatum. "Either you pay for this wedding or you're out of the family." So now I have to ask, if this is what family means, do I even want to be a part of it? Their ultimatum echoed in my head. Either you pay or you're out of the family. It was a line drawn in the sand, and they expected me to cave. But for the first time in my life, I realized something. They needed me more than I needed them. I had spent years chasing their approval, hoping that if I just worked hard enough, if I just proved myself, they would finally treat me as an equal to my sister. But this wasn't about love or family. This was about control. I took a deep breath and replied, "If that's how you see family, then I guess I was never really part of it." And then I blocked their numbers. The silence was deafening at first. No more guilt-tripping calls, no more manipulative messages. Just peace. Of course, the extended family drama continued. Some relatives called me heartless. Others told me they understood but still thought I should compromise for the sake of peace. But peace had a price, and I had been paying it my entire life. Now, for the first time, I was choosing myself. My parents might never speak to me again. My sister might always see me as the villain. And that's okay. Because $200,000 could buy a lavish wedding, but it couldn't buy my self-respect. And honestly, I'd rather be broke than be their ATM. Weeks passed, and the silence from my parents remained. No calls, no messages, nothing. At first, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't burdened by their expectations or guilt-tripping. But then the doubt started creeping in. Had I gone too far? Should I have at least offered something just to keep the peace? But every time I started second-guessing myself, I remembered the years of struggle. The sleepless nights, juggling work and studies, eating instant noodles while my sister posted pictures from exotic vacations our parents paid for. Where was this family loyalty back then? Then one day I got a message from an unknown number. It was my sister. "Sister, you've really ruined everything. Mom won't stop crying, Dad is furious, and now I have to cut my wedding budget because of you." I stared at the message, stunned. "No, how are you? No, can we talk?" Just pure entitlement. Me. "Maybe you should ask Mom and Dad why they didn't save for your wedding instead of blaming me." Her response was instant. "Sister, they thought they could count on you. You're successful. You owe them for everything they did for us." That word "oh" made my blood boil. Me? I owe them nothing. They made it clear I was on my own years ago. I just followed their lesson. I hit send and blocked her number. The fallout. After that, the real war began. My parents tried to turn every relative against me. Suddenly, I was the villain of the entire family. The whispers started. He's changed. Money made him selfish. He doesn't respect his parents. Some cousins messaged me privately, saying they understood my decision but didn't want to take sides. Others outright called me an ungrateful disgrace. Then, my parents did something I never expected. They went on social media. They made a public post about how their own son betrayed them after everything they sacrificed for him. They painted me as a heartless, greedy child who abandoned his parents and refused to help his sister. The comments section exploded with distant relatives and old family friends expressing their outrage. Some even reached out to me directly, calling me disgusting for letting my sister suffer. First, I was furious. Then I laughed. Because for all their talk about family loyalty, they had no problem humiliating me in front of the world. So, I decided to respond just once. I wrote a long, calm post explaining the truth. How they refused to help me with college, telling me to be independent. How I worked multiple jobs to survive, while my sister got full financial support. How, after years of ignoring me, they suddenly expected $200,000 like it was their right. How, when I said no, they disowned me. I ended with one simple question. If I was never worth investing in as their child, why am I suddenly worth $200,000 now? Then I logged off. Moving forward, the backlash was instant. Some relatives deleted their nasty comments. Others tried to justify my parents' actions. My sister? She called me, screaming that I had publicly humiliated them. I let her rant, then said, "Now you know how it feels." And I hung up. That was months ago. My parents still haven't spoken to me. My sister went ahead with her wedding, on a smaller budget, and made sure I wasn't invited. And you know what? I don't care. For the first time in my life, I'm truly free. No more expectations, no more manipulation. Just me, my hard-earned success, and the peace that comes with knowing I chose myself over their toxic demands. And honestly, best decision I ever made. As the months passed, I realized something. Losing my family didn't feel like a loss at all. In fact, it felt like a weight had been lifted. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more feeling like I was never enough. I focused on myself. My career thrived. Without the constant emotional drain of dealing with my parents and their demands, I found I had more energy, more clarity. I reconnected with old friends, traveled, and finally allowed myself to enjoy the success I had worked so hard for. But just when I thought I had moved on completely, life threw me another curveball. One day, I got a call from an unknown number. I usually ignore those, but for some reason I picked up. "Hello." There was silence for a moment, then a voice I hadn't heard in over a year. "Son, it's your father." The apology or the trap? I didn't say anything at first. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, like he wasn't sure if I would hang up. "Look, I know things got out of hand, but your mother and I have been thinking. Maybe we were too harsh." "Too harsh?" That was an understatement. "Your sister is married now, and well, we miss you," he continued. "Your mother wants to see you. Can we talk?" For a moment, a part of me wanted to believe this was genuine. That maybe, just maybe, they had realized their mistakes. But I knew better. My parents didn't just change overnight. There had to be a reason for this sudden call. "Why now?" I finally asked. "You had no problem cutting me off when I said no. So why are you calling me now?" He hesitated. "Because things aren't great financially. Your mother's been sick, and we've had some unexpected expenses. We were hoping you could help out a little." And there it was. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could give them. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You disowned me, turned the whole family against me, humiliated me online. And now that you need money, you suddenly remember I exist?" "It's not like that, son." "It's exactly like that." I took a deep breath. This was my moment. The moment I got to choose me again. I struggled alone for years and you didn't care. Now you're struggling and you expect me to care. I let that sink in before delivering the final blow. "You taught me to be independent. I'm just following your lesson." And with that I hung up. The final goodbye. That was the last time I heard from them. I don't know if they ever expected me to give in, but I didn't. And I never will. Because here's the truth. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you when you need them. They showed me who they were when I needed them most. And when they needed me, I simply returned the favor. Now I live life on my own terms. No geet, no drama. Just freedom. And let me tell you, freedom feels amazing. Moving on without regrets. After that final call, I waited for the next wave of family drama. More guilt-tripping messages. More public shaming. More people trying to convince me to forgive and forget. But it never came. Maybe they realized I was serious this time. Maybe they found someone else to manipulate. Or maybe deep down they knew they had burned the bridge too badly to rebuild it. Whatever the reason, I no longer cared. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. Finding my true family. As time went on, I started realizing something important. Just because I had lost my biological family didn't mean I was alone. The friends who stood by me, the people who checked in on me even when I had nothing to offer them, they were my real family. I built deeper connections with people who actually cared about me, not just what I could do for them. I surrounded myself with those who celebrated my success without expecting a piece of it. And that, more than anything, gave me peace. A message from my sister. Months later, out of nowhere, I got an email from my sister. Subject: Is this really how it ends? The email was long, emotional, and full of half apologies. She admitted that she had always been the favorite, that she never really understood how different our childhoods were. She said she regretted how she treated me, but at the same time she still hoped I would find it in my heart to make amends with our parents. They're still our parents, she wrote. They made mistakes, but they raised us. Isn't that worth something? I sat there staring at the screen, feeling nothing. A year ago I might have felt guilt. I might have considered giving them another chance. But now I saw it for what it was. They didn't raise me. They tolerated me. They neglected me when I needed them most. And when I succeeded despite it all, they only came back when they needed something from me. I thought about responding. I thought about explaining one last time why I had to walk away. But then I realized I didn't owe them an explanation. So I deleted the email. The future is mine. Now I wake up every day without the weight of my past dragging me down. I work hard, I enjoy my success, and I don't feel guilty for putting myself first. My life belongs to me now. No more toxic family. No more expectations. No more being treated like an ATM. Just freedom. And if my parents or my sister ever wonder why I never looked back, the answer is simple. They taught me that family is conditional. So I finally learned to live without one. Building a life on my own terms. It's been over 2 years since I last spoke to my parents. 2 years of complete silence, of no guilt-tripping calls, no desperate pleas for money, no emotional manipulation disguised as family duty. And you know what? I don't miss them. Not even a little. In those 2 years, my life has flourished. I've advanced in my career, traveled to places I never thought I'd see, and most importantly, surrounded myself with people who actually care about me. Not because of what I can provide, but because of who I am. I've built friendships stronger than any so-called family bond one had before. Friends who don't see me as a bank account, who don't measure my worth based on how much I can sacrifice for them. It's funny. After cutting ties with my parents, I realized just how much of my life had been spent trying to earn their approval, their love, their validation. But I never needed it. I was always enough. A wedding invitation, and an unexpected choice. Then one day something unexpected happened. I received an ornate envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew exactly where it was from before I even opened it. It was my sister's wedding invitation. After all the drama, all the insults, all the blame she threw at me, she still sent me an invite. First I laughed. Was this another manipulation tactic? Did she truly want me there? Or was it just another way for my parents to try to reel me back in? I stared at the invitation for days, debating whether to go. Not because I wanted to, but because I wondered if this was some kind of test. Was I still that person who longed for their approval? Or had I finally broken free? And then I made my decision. The wedding day. The day of the wedding I didn't go. Instead, I booked a ticket to Europe. While my family was gathered in a ballroom, likely gossiping about my absence, I was sipping wine on a balcony in Italy, watching the sunset over the sea. No regrets. No second guessing. Just peace. The final goodbye. I never reached out after that, and neither did they. That was the moment I knew I was finally free. Some people might say family is everything, that no matter what, you should always find a way to forgive. But not all family deserves a second chance. Not all bonds are worth repairing. Sometimes walking away isn't selfish. Sometimes it's survival. And for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving, I'm living. A life without regrets. Years passed, and my decision to cut ties with my family remained unchanged. There were no surprise calls, no unexpected visits, no half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. They had written me off just as I had written them off. And yet I never felt lonely. I built a life filled with genuine connections, friends who became my real family. I surrounded myself with people who supported me without conditions, without expectations of financial gain. I learned to celebrate my own success without guilt, without wondering if I owed someone for it. Most importantly, I stopped feeling like I had to prove my worth to anyone. A message from the past. One evening while scrolling through emails, I noticed a familiar name in my inbox, my sister. Subject: I thought you should know. Curious, I hesitated before opening it. The message was short, almost cold. Dad had a heart attack. He survived, but he's not doing well. Mom is struggling. I don't expect anything from you, but I thought you should know. I sat there rereading the words over and over. Years ago, this message would have shattered me. I would have felt the pull of obligation, the urge to reach out, to fix things, to be the good son they had always expected me to be. But now I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just emptiness. Choosing myself again. I thought about responding. Maybe sending a polite reply. Acknowledging the news, keeping it distant. But then I realized, what would be the point? Would my father subtly see me as his son again, instead of a walking bank account? Would my mother finally regret how she had treated me? Would my sister, after all these years, truly understand why I had walked away? No. Nothing would change. They had already decided who I was in their story. The selfish one, the ungrateful one, the villain. And I wasn't interested in rewriting that narrative for them. So I did the only thing that felt right. I deleted the email. The power of letting go. That was the last time I heard from my sister. I don't know what happened after that. Maybe my father recovered. Maybe he didn't. Maybe my mother found a way to manage. Maybe she didn't. But their lives were no longer my responsibility. Walking away wasn't just about escaping their toxic expectations. It was about reclaiming my own future. One where I was no longer burdened by guilt, obligation, or the illusion of family loyalty. I chose myself once, and I would keep choosing myself every single day. And that was the happiest ending I could ever ask for. Years later, no regrets. It's been almost a decade since I walked away from my family. A decade of peace, growth, and building a life that's truly mine. I've accomplished things I never thought possible. Bought my dream home, traveled the world, met incredible people who became my chosen family. I no longer think about my parents with resentment or anger. I simply don't think about them at all. For a long time, I wondered if they ever regretted how things turned out. If they ever sat in their house, reminiscing about the son they pushed away, asking themselves, was it worth it? But now I realize it doesn't matter. Their regrets, or lack thereof, are not my concern. I don't check for updates. I don't ask about them. I don't wonder if they're okay. Because for the first time in my life, I am okay. Running into my past. One day, while grabbing coffee at a small cafe in another city, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. I turned around and there she was, my sister. She looked different. Older, a little worn out. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. We stood there in silence before she finally spoke. It's been so long, can we sit and talk? The conversation I never expected. I could have said no. I could have walked away like I had before. But something in me told me to sit down, to listen, not for closure but out of curiosity. She sighed, staring at her coffee. You really never came back, huh? No, I said simply. She nodded. They're gone now. Mom and Dad. I guess you probably didn't know. I didn't react. I just waited. Dad passed a few years ago. Heart failure. Mom, she wasn't the same after that. She passed last year. I didn't feel sadness, just a quiet acceptance. They were gone. Just like that. They never stopped talking about you, she added. They were angry for a long time. But at the end, I think they missed you. I let the words hang in the air before responding. Maybe. But missing someone and treating them right when they're around are two different things. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess you're right. For the first time in years I saw something in her eyes, understanding. Maybe even regret. I didn't come here to make you feel bad, she said. I wanted you to know. And I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I took a deep breath. This was it. The apology I had never expected. And yet, it didn't change anything. It didn't rewrite the past. But maybe, just maybe, it meant she had finally learned. I appreciate that, I said. I really do. She gave a small sad smile. So where do we go from here? Choice once again. I looked at her, this person who had once been part of my life, part of my pain. I thought about everything that had happened, the years of silence, the bitterness, the wounds that had long since healed. And then I said, I don't know. But I think I'm okay with that. She nodded, understanding. And for the first time we parted ways, not with anger, not with guilt, but with something that almost felt like peace. As I walked away I realized something. I didn't need revenge, or an apology, or a dramatic reconciliation. I had already won. Because in the end I had chosen myself. And I would keep choosing myself over and over again. And that was the best decision I ever made. The sister's apology at the end, of course, brings up mixed emotions. On one hand, her words can be seen as a genuine realization, an attempt to make things right. But on the other hand, does an apology really erase years of pain, inequality, and struggle? Probably not. The protagonist wisely understands that apologies aren't a magic wand. They don't undo the way you felt when you were left alone to face the hardest parts of life. The decision to leave the past where it belongs is powerful and mature. Sometimes the best way to move forward is not to let those who hurt you back into your life. In that moment when the protagonist tells their sister, I don't know, but I think I'm okay with that, feels like a true victory. Not a victory over the family, but over their own past struggles, and a step toward peace and freedom. What do you think? Could more have been done to reconcile? Or was everything said and done enough to show that the chosen path was the right one? The sister's apology, while meaningful in its own way, seems more like closure for her than a true resolution for the protagonist. It's almost as if she's looking for forgiveness to ease her own guilt, rather than genuinely acknowledging the depth of what her brother endured. And that's the thing about apologies, they don't always fix things. Sometimes they just confirm that moving on was the right decision. But what's so powerful about this story is the protagonist's unwavering commitment to their own boundaries. They don't let guilt or nostalgia dictate their choices anymore. They've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, support, and love. And when those things are missing, it's okay to walk away. The moment in the cafe where they meet their sister again feels like a crossroads. It's a chance to decide whether to reopen the door or keep it closed. But the choice to say, I don't know and I'm okay with that, shows that healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. It means finding peace within yourself. Even if the people who hurt you never fully understand what they did. It's also worth noting how much growth the protagonist has shown. They don't react with anger or bitterness when the sister shares the news about their parents. Instead, there's just calm acceptance. That's a testament to how far they've come. No longer tied to the emotional manipulation of the past. No longer seeking approval from people who didn't value them. What do you think about the sister's question? Where do we go from here? Was there a missed opportunity for a new beginning? Or was walking away again the right choice? The sister's question, where do we go from here, felt like a moment of vulnerability. But for the protagonist, it wasn't just about where they could go. It was about whether they wanted to go anywhere at all. After years of pain, neglect, and betrayal, they had built a life that didn't depend on their family. Reopening that door would mean risking the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. Even though the apology felt sincere, the protagonist had every right to be cautious. Apologies can be a step toward healing, but they don't erase history. The sister's regrets, while meaningful, came after years of enabling their parents' behavior, after siding with them during one of the most painful periods in the protagonist's life. That's not something you can just forgive and forget. It takes time, effort, and a lot of trust to rebuild what was broken. Still, the way the protagonist handled that final interaction was a sign of growth. They didn't lash out. They didn't throw the past in their sister's face. Instead, they calmly acknowledged her words, appreciated her effort, and left the conversation without bitterness. It wasn't a hard no to reconciliation. It was an honest admission that they weren't ready and might never be. And that's okay. Sometimes we expect closure to look like a perfect resolution, where everyone hugs and cries and makes up. But in reality, closure often comes in smaller, quieter moments, like sitting across from someone who hurt you and realizing you don't need their validation anymore. As the protagonists walked away from that cafe, it wasn't just a goodbye to their sister. It was the final affirmation of the life they had chosen. A life free of toxic expectations, free of manipulation, and full of peace and self-respect. In the years that followed, they never regretted their decision. Sure, there were moments of reflection, moments when they thought about what could have been. But those moments never turned into guilt or doubt. Instead, they served as reminders of how far they had come. Sometimes the most powerful act of love you can show yourself is choosing to protect your peace, even if it means letting go of people who once meant everything to you. What do you think? Did the sisters' apology open the door to future reconciliation? Or was this interaction truly the end of the story? As the protagonists walked away from the cafe, their thoughts lingered briefly on the sisters' question. Where do we go from here? The truth was they didn't know, and maybe they didn't need to. Not every story requires a clean ending, and not every relationship can, or should, be salvaged. Over time, life continued to move forward. The protagonist's career blossomed, and their chosen family, the friends who had stood by them without condition, remained a constant source of support. These were the people who celebrated their successes, listened when life felt overwhelming, and never asked for anything in return. With them, the protagonists built a life filled with joy, trust, and genuine love, the kind they had never experienced growing up. But one thing about life is that it rarely lets the past stay buried forever. A few years later, the protagonists found themselves at another unexpected crossroads. It was an ordinary day, emails, meetings, and a coffee break at their favorite corner cafe. Then, as they were scrolling through their phone, a notification popped up. It was a text from an unknown number. It's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I hope you'll at least read this. It was their sister. At first, the protagonist thought about deleting the message without a second glance. After all, they had moved on. But something about the tone was different. There was no entitlement, no guilt-tripping. Just a quiet plea for acknowledgement. Against their better judgment, they kept reading. The message was long. The sister admitted that her life hadn't been as perfect as it seemed. The dream wedding she had insisted on years ago? It had ended in divorce. Her husband, the perfect man their parents had helped her marry, turned out to be controlling and emotionally distant. And now she was a single mother struggling to make ends meet. I know I've hurt you, she wrote. I know our parents hurt you even more. And I was wrong to take their side. I just didn't see it back then. But now that I'm a parent myself, I see everything differently. I don't expect anything from you. I wanted to say that I'm sorry. Truly. For the first time, the message felt raw, unguarded. There were no excuses, no justifications. Just an honest acknowledgement of the damage done. And at the very end, one line stood out. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. But if not, I understand. The protagonist stared at the message for what felt like hours. A part of them wanted to ignore it, to maintain the boundaries they had worked so hard to establish. But another part, one that hadn't surfaced in years, felt a flicker of curiosity. Could people truly change? And more importantly, did they want to find out? They decided to sit with the message for a while. There was no rush, no deadline, no pressure to respond. For once in their life, the choice was entirely their own. Weeks passed before they finally replied. Thank you for your message. I appreciate your honesty, and I'm glad you found clarity in your life. I'm not sure if I'm ready to reconnect, but I'll think about it. It was a cautious response, but it was also a step forward, if only a small one. In the end, the story didn't have a neat conclusion. The protagonist never fully reconciled with their sister, and the scars left by their parents never completely faded. But that was okay. Healing isn't always about fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's about learning to live with the cracks and finding beauty in the strength it takes to move forward. Their sister's message didn't change the past, but it did serve as a reminder. Even the deepest wounds can inspire growth, and sometimes, the people who hurt us the most can find their own way toward redemption. The protagonists kept choosing themselves as they always had. But now there. If this video hurt you, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to those who will understand.